Hi, Robert Sportwood here. I am joined tonight with oh shoot, hold on. Stupid Zoom. Okay. I'm joined tonight with Joe Hart, who is the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of The Final Girl, Obscuria, or else I'm not even reading a bio. I'm just trying to remember all your new titles. And
Yeah,
then he was actually just recently nominated for the Edgar Award for his novel that came out last year, or else. So congratulations on that, Joe.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And so we are going to discuss the book you have out today. Well, actually, I'm sorry, it's not out today. Technically, it comes out at the beginning of next month. However, it is an Amazon first reads.
Right.
That one is called Where They Lie. It's published by Thomas and Mercer. So congratulations on that as well. But yeah, let's start first about the novel that came out last year and the fact that again it's nominated for an Edgar Award, which is huge. So how did you did you just wake up one day and get an email or like
That's
what was that experience like?
yeah. I mean, it was funny because yeah, it was kind of a wake up. Made coffee in the morning, did my usual routine, and then like went on Twitter, and I seen way more notifications than is the norm for me when I like log into Twitter. So somebody had seen the Edgar kind of the nomination uh, list and whatnot. And so they like tagged everybody in the list and stuff. So I was like, oh, cool. I was like, all right. And it's like, it took like a few minutes to kind of register like what was going on. I was like, oh, wow. Okay, cool. That's actually very, very kind of nice and prestigious and awesome. So I was like, it was really cool. So yeah, it was a really nice surprise. And yeah, since then, just emailing back and forth with the organization and whatnot about the few things they do. They do like a symposium for each of the different categories and whatnot, where all the people nominated get together and then do kind of like a little chat, like we're doing now, just to go over the genre, the books, and just about ourselves a little bit too. So that is coming up next week. I think the 12th is when we're doing ours for best paperback original. So, but yeah, it was just it was a shock, it was a surprise. I did not expect it at all. So it was really nice. Yeah.
And so for those who don't know, can you tell us what the book or else is about?
Sure. Yeah. So basic rundown. It's basically a domestic suspense novel. It has a main character who is a mid-list thriller author. Write What You Know, of course. And he moves back to his hometown to take care of his dad, who is has the first stages of dementia, and kind of starts up a like an affair with kind of an old high school flame down the street. But she is married with a couple kids, and shortly after they begin their affair, he gets a warning to end their affair or else. And it's unsigned, anonymous. And then shortly thereafter, her husband is murdered. It looks like a home break-in, and she and her two sons are missing. So then our main character, Andy, he just starts to kind of take it upon himself to try and find her, and that's kind of where the novel takes off. It's kind of just goes from there, and he digs into the kind of the neighborhood secrets and whatnot to try and find this person that he cares deeply about. So yeah.
Right. And so that book is a standalone.
Mhm.
The book that just came out, or I guess technically is coming out beginning of next month, but is available as a first reads for anybody who has, I guess, a Prime member on Amazon. Um, that is the first book in a new series. So can you tell us kind of just the setup of that book?
Sure. Yeah. The new one, Where They Lie, follows a woman. Her name is Nora McTavish, and she is a child protective services worker. And she's kind of like a forensic investigator, is kind of the actual term for kind of what she does. But she basically goes around and just investigates, accusations of abuse or neglect, that type of thing. And she came from a really dark past. Her father actually was like a mass shooter, and one of her siblings passed away during like this whole thing that went on with her dad, like when it was all kind of a culmination of his what he did way in the past. And so she's deeply damaged by it, but she's kind of poured all of her angst and anger and everything into her career and helping people. And the kind of setup for the book is a family that she investigated uh, a few months before the opening of the story is in kids that were in an influencer's home. Kaylee is the character who is an influencer, like kind of on YouTube and whatnot. And they have three foster children, her and her husband. And they have a private plane, and the plane suddenly crashes shortly after takeoff. Kaylee is the only survivor, and she basically says, you know, the oldest foster daughter, Andrea, is the one that caused the crash. She forced the plane down once they got into the air. She was in the co-pilot seat. And so then, yeah, Nora just kind of takes it upon herself because she's wondering what she missed, if there was something else she could have done, kind of feels very guilty about that. So then it just goes from there. It kind of gets kind of twisty, and yeah, a lot of tension, suspense, and there's things going on in the background. Yeah, as she kind of dives in deeper into the mystery and whatnot. So yeah.
So, now when you started this book, did you know it was going to be the first book in a series, or were you starting it more as just like a standalone? And then as you were writing it, it became more of, oh, this could potentially, yeah, there could definitely be at least another book. I mean, is that something you kind of thought farther ahead, or did you finish it and then after the fact, it kind of came up that, oh, you know what, we could continue this?
Yeah, it was a little both. It kind of started out as just kind of a good idea for more or less a standalone, and as I got deeper and deeper into the character, I thought, okay, she's definitely interesting. I think I could write more than one story with her as the lead. And yeah, when I finished and handed it to my editor, she was just she really was enamored with the story and the character and whatnot. So when the time came for the next project, I'd already been tossing around an idea for kind of a follow up, and I pitched it at her, and she was like, "Yeah, I really like that idea and stuff." So then I just kind of ran with it, and yeah, so I finished the second book about 6 weeks ago, something like that, and handed it in and whatnot. So that is up for pre-order right now, along with Where They Lie. So that one's called Never Come Back. So that's the second book, continues Nora's story and whatnot. So
So what kind of research? I mean, did you do any type of specific research like with, Child Protective Services? Is that something you were familiar with, or is it something that I was at an event, I forget how many weeks ago, but it was with for Harlan Coben's new book, and someone had asked him about research, and he basically talked about how he tries to do zero research because it usually gets in the way of the story.
yeah,
Because oftentimes, people who do a lot of research, they spend all that time researching, and then they feel like, okay, I spent all this time researching, I really need to, show my work. And so they add in all this other stuff that really then, the story kind of slows down. It's more or less like, hey, look how smart I am.
yeah,
I mean, for me personally, like I try to, I try to make sure things are factual as much as possible, but I don't like, I don't like some some writers who are just like, they'll go on like ride-alongs with cops, or they'll like, they'll travel to another country, and it's like,
yeah.
yeah, I guess if you have the time and stuff, but I don't know, like, so with like CPS and stuff, is that something, I mean, how did that kind of tie in? Were you familiar with that, or what kind of research was done on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with you. I think you can get lost totally in the research and whatnot, and then especially when you're writing, I mean, it can kind of invade because maybe you get a little, worried, like you said, worried about being accurate about everything and whatnot. But yeah, so I mean, my research usually I do enough where it's definitely believable, where you have some kind of concrete facts and whatnot to kind of jump off with. So I actually a friend of mine was an assistant district attorney for the area that we live in for many years, and she had dealt in a ton of child protective services cases and had quite a few friends that were CPS workers and whatnot. So we just sat down, we emailed a bunch, and we sat down one day and I just asked her a bunch of questions, and she just rattled off a ton of stories, and just gave me the basic details and whatnot, about all these cases and different things. And it was just fascinating and pretty disturbing. The different things that happen, like right in my backyard. That of course, I a lot of times I don't read the local paper or whatever else, but I mean, these were things. I mean, there are court cases right here in the county and stuff like that. And yeah, it was just really interesting. And I thought, so many times it's CPS workers, they do get a kind of a bad rap, for the job and for what they have to do and whatnot. And I thought that was a really interesting aspect and kind of dynamic. The characters kind of balance what she's dealing with as far as the parameters of her job, and then what she knows is right or wants to do. So yeah, I dove into those different kind of the stories and the cases that she kind of highlighted for me there, and went over and kind of started looking at how I could weave some of those details into what I had as far as in mind for a story and whatnot. So it was really helpful, some of those little things that kind of bring that realism to the story and whatnot. But like you said, I tried not to get lost in the weeds, because it's easy to do when you start going down the research rabbit hole and whatnot. So yeah.
And so can you hold up the book again so
Sure.
everyone can see what the book looks like?
Mhm.
So, was that tight? And that's a really good cover, by the way. I feel
Thank
like
you.
for the most part, you've gotten really fortunate with all your Thomas and Mercer covers.
Yeah.
They've always had really good covers for you. Um, is that title one that you had, or like how did that title come about?
Yeah, that one kind of jumped out at me like midway through the book. That one kind of came to me, and I think I've said before, we've been talking and stuff, like titles are my worst thing. Like it's usually they're either there before I start writing the story, or I get to the end and I'm like, I have no idea what to call this. So that one, yeah, kind of it was about midway through, and I just kind of started thinking about all the different characters, and pretty much all of them have secrets, and they're all not being fully truthful about everything. So I just thought about all the different places that people lie, and how they lie and whatnot, and that's kind of how I came up with the title and whatnot. So yeah.
Now, with this being the first book in a new series, is it, and I guess we're kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, but is this one of is this a series kind of like a I don't want to say like a Jack Reacher series, but in that way where like even though it's a series, they can still kind of be read as standalones. Like when the second book comes out, are people going to really need to read this first book first before they read the second book, or would they be able to, read the second book and and they can still kind of get into the story? They know who the characters are. I mean, or is it one of those where it's just like, no, you're going to have to read book one, book two, book three?
Yeah. Yeah, I think for the most part, anybody could pick up book two and just read it and enjoy it. You get a little bit of a feel for Nora's background, a little recapper, and then when she's interacting with some of the other characters, some more of that is kind of touched on. So, yeah, very little, from the first book bleeds over into the second. It's just a couple of details at the end of the first book, kind of point the direction for the second book. But really, yeah, and that's what I always try to do for the most part, unless it's like a really tightly woven, like a trilogy or something like that. If it's a series, I try to have it where you can just pick up the second book, and if you want to do a little background reading, like a synopsis of the first book, you'd probably be just fine to run with it. So that's kind of what I did there. So yeah, I think people can just pick up the second one and enjoy it. You will obviously get a little more out of everything, reading the first book, just because I spent, and I'm getting a few reviews back, which, most of them are positive and stuff, but people are kind of bumping on the fact that, a lot of the time in the first book is spent on my main character. But I just that was just very very much intentional. Like this, she was very interesting character, right? So much of the book is a lot about her and her backstory and how she's approaching this situation and whatnot. And I felt that was definitely needed. So yeah, it's a little more of the groundwork is laid for Nora's character in book one, but book two is you could just pick it up and go.
So speaking of your main character, Nora McTavish, where
Mhm.
it's an interesting name. Like, is that
Mhm.
something that, like, I don't know if we discussed this before, and anybody, I mean, wants to check out the video we did last year. I think we talked more about, your writing style and
Mhm.
just like kind of how you go about with writing and everything. So with this book, um, yeah, I mean, just, how did you come up with that character name?
Yeah. I always liked the name Nora. I had a couple friends named Nora when I was younger and stuff. But the Nora Roberts. I mean, I read several, some of her books, and then also just that the article on her in the past, which was absolutely fantastic. She seemed like such a just a like a great all around person and writer and whatnot. And I was like, she just seemed very straightforward and very strong. So I kind of had her name, and just I liked the name in general. But then the last name was funny because I'm mostly Irish, and I like to name some of my characters with kind of the Irish last names and whatnot. And there's a road actually not far from our house that's McTavish like Lane, and I drive by it all the time, and I'm like, McTavish, that is such a cool, like, kind of like just kind of rolls off the tongue and stuff. So back in my mind, yeah, when I started writing this one, I was like, okay, first, she's going to be Nora, and then yeah, that's I, I stole the I stole the local road name. So yeah, just funny where you pick a few things up and whatnot. So.
So again, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but do we know if there's going to be a third book, or at the very least, like, do you have ideas to continue the series, or right now it's just like, okay, we're going to see how this does, and the second book's can come out next year.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're gonna wait and see exactly how it does and how it's received and whatnot. But I definitely do have an idea for a third book. And yeah, Nora's story isn't finished really in the second book. So yeah, I have pretty good direction about where I want to go with the third. Um, but yeah, we're gonna see. Hopefully, the response is really good, and people want to keep reading. And so far, reviews have been pretty good and positive and whatnot. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll get to keep writing her. So yeah.
So I think we may have discussed this last year. I'm trying to remember now. But you write in a lot of different genres, or at least
Mhm.
I mean, you started out horror,
Mhm.
and then we had your trilogy, which was essentially science fiction. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you know,
Yeah.
and then you had the Obscura, which is science fiction, and then
Mhm.
or else, which was like essentially domestic suspense, and then now you
Mhm.
have, you know what I mean? Like, do you
Yeah.
do you find yourself kind of leaning now more towards these types of books, or are you like ready to maybe like jump back you know what I mean, like you still gonna like
Yeah.
kind of genre hop? Or because I mean sometimes this happens with like some authors, they'll start out, I mean, even like personally, big Stephen King fan growing up, I was like, I want to be a horror writer, and then so my first couple stuff, a lot of early stuff was more horror, and then I just kind of drifted away from that.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't really enjoy it, I just, for me it was twofold. I guess kind of I thought I had more of a readership just with more, straight up thrillers and crime.
Mhm.
But even like looking back at even my more, quote unquote horror or like supernatural stuff, it still, was mostly a thriller. So like I
Yeah.
always had that aspect there. So like but I mean, is that something where you feel like, you're still, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, what do you, I don't say what do you consider yourself? Because that's kind of, I don't know, kind of dumb to say, oh, oh, I'm a, because I mean, well, some authors, they're very, much like Paul Tremblay. I mean, he wants to be a
Yeah.
horror writer. I mean, I
Right.
remember reading or seeing an interview or somewhere where when the Cabinet of the Wood, when the Cabinet at the end of the wood, the Cabinet at the End of the World came out.
Yes.
Essentially he was saying that the publisher was really kind of marketing more as a thriller, because you read the book, it's a thriller, but
Yeah.
he really wanted to kind of step back from that because he didn't want to, he wants to be a horror writer, he doesn't want to go. So I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, like I don't know, like how are you kind of viewing that from your end?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I always, like you said, I started out with horror, and that is definitely like probably my first love. And I I've dragged that through line probably through all of my books, no matter what genre they are, because I've had quite a few beta readers and a few friends say, I'm just waiting for that scene when it comes in one of your books, you always put one of the scenes that are just, it's like borderline horror, where it's like the next scene could actually pivot into a horror novel and stuff. And they're like, don't change that. Don't, that's kind of your trademark, like to keep that in there. And so I think I'm like you said. I mean, there's maybe a little greater readership in the suspense or mystery genre, thriller genre, but I like blending a lot of things. I mean, I love all those genres. I feel like kind of bringing a little bit more of that, yeah, the terror, the horror, and kind of just adding it in here and there into the suspense and domestic side of things is kind of makes me happy. That's kind of what I like to do with it. So I feel like I have other ideas for straight like horror novels or science fiction and whatnot, and I'll probably eventually write them. But this is probably the kind of the area, this genre that I can play around and have the most fun with right now, and continue to do the stuff I like to do and whatnot. So yeah, I think that's probably going forward. I'll just kind of keep doing, dabbling a little bit here and there, but yeah, mostly this genre from here on out, I suppose. So yeah.
And so I see the audiobook is narrated by Kate Rudd. Is that something where
Yeah.
you um like did you request Kate Rudd? I mean, I kind of know how the process goes over there, but like kind of like let me know, like, how did she come about narrating it? What was there sometimes, other you get sent a sample and you hear the voice and you're like, what, this is what I was thinking. And I mean, like, yeah, I mean, how much input did you really have in terms of like the narrator aspect of it?
Yeah, I think this one, like you said, it's a little different for each book and whatnot. But I think this one they sent over that they had, they were suggesting her, and of course, I was fairly familiar with her name because she's done some pretty big books. So I just gave a listen again to some of her work and stuff, and thought, yeah, it's a really good fit. So yeah, it was more like kind of like they're like, this works. So I was like, yep. So it was easy and straightforward. But like you said, sometimes it's like you get a few different options, and you can kind of like listen and see. It makes it a little tougher because you got to try and really think about who's capturing the voice of the character in your mind. Is that what's going to come across to most readers, and how are they going to hear it and whatnot? But yeah, this one is pretty simple. They just kind of like this is kind of who we're thinking. I was like, good, that's great. So it's less than less to think about on my end, I guess. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And for those who don't really know, I mean, audiobooks are obviously a really huge growing market right now. And there are some audiobook narrators who are rock stars. I mean, they are
Mhm.
hugely sought. I mean, they have their own fan base where
Yeah.
oftentimes, and even for me, I mean, there are some narrators where if they're narrating the book, I'll listen to it. It
Yeah.
doesn't really matter who it is.
Yeah.
And I remember one story. I think it was it was Jack Carr with Terminal List, where the publisher said, "Hey, here's who we're thinking for the audiobook." Or they sent him like a sample, I guess, person reading the first chapter, whatever else, and he's just like, "Yeah, I'm not really sure about this." And they're like, "Okay, well, if you have anybody else in mind, just let us know." I think he said it was like, like it was like he had like a day or whatever to find it. So he went on, I think to Audible or wherever, and was listening to different samples. And then he came back with this one guy. He was just like, "I think this guy would be really good, Ray Porter." And he said that he had no idea, because he wasn't really familiar with audiobooks. He just really liked the sound of the voice. He wasn't really familiar just how big Ray Porter was. And they were
Sure.
like, "Well, we can see if he's available,
Yeah.
if he'll do it." And of course he did. And those books have been really huge in audio. But yeah, I mean, especially now with just talk of like AI, like there's a lot of like AI narrating that's
Mhm.
done. And
Yeah.
I mean, like I remember, I think it was on Instagram, or I saw someone had they had given kind of a poor review to one of my books because they listened to it because the Kindle was reading it to them. And I'm
Mhm.
like, I don't know if that's fair to have the computer reading, because it's really a performance. I mean, and, a
Yeah.
really good audiobook narrator is going to basically bring the book alive.
Yep.
that way, because it's not just, reading like a monotone. I mean, there are some narrators which, God, I don't know if you listen to a lot of audiobooks, but I mean, there are some narrators where I will not deal with them,
Yeah.
or I will always listen to, like, the sample first, because sometimes and I don't even know how they get work, quite honestly, because it's not good.
Yeah.
And then this idea with AI, which actually is a good question, I guess, because what's your thoughts on this whole, everybody kind of freaking out about AI? I mean, personally, I just don't. I'm not in the camp right now of, freaking out, but I don't know. What are your thoughts about the whole AI?
I'm not freaking out yet. I kind of see a little bit of the writing on the wall. I mean, I think anywhere there's actual money to be made or corners to be cut, I mean, it's going to roll in that direction a little bit. I feel like AI is going to maybe cut into ghostwriters' work. Maybe first will be the first thing, or people who are writing their like autobiography. They will utilize that. And I mean, that's one of those things where it's like a personal choice if you use, some sort of tool or software to kind of enhance your own thing or something. When it's especially when it's just like your life or it's just about you. Creating fiction, I mean, I hate the idea of a machine creating something that people have always done. I really can't stand that. But it may happen one way or the other. But yeah, no, I'm not freaking out yet. I don't think it's coming, for our jobs anytime soon. But I think it's going to be there. I saw somebody talk about it online the other day, and they're like, "Well, it's you already use spell checker," and I'm like, "That's not the same thing as AI." And it's like a program versus something that's completely creating something new is not the same. But I I
Yeah,
think it
but
I think it's in the way.
Yeah, but right now I would say it's not, I don't know, from what I can tell, they're not really necessarily creating anything new. They're basically taking things that are already there, and it's not like
Rehashing it.
necessarily original ideas, because, and I mean, yeah, there's the idea of spell check. Like, I don't know, like I usually, I'm a big fan of Grammarly. I'll use
Mhm.
that typically to kind of, if I write a chapter or whatever else, I'll run it through Grammarly to just kind of see, if there's anything that's, maybe sentence structure, maybe can be a little bit tightened or stuff like that. So, which is, and again,
Sure.
yeah, it's a form of AI, but it's not like, them, taking, like, telling it like, hey, I want a story about this, this, and this. I
Right.
mean, and I personally haven't even really played with that. If anything, I think really more
Yeah.
for the artists, it's, like, because you can tell it, I want this, this, and this, and then it's going to create an image. I mean, that I would be, more scared about than just being
Yeah.
a fiction writer right now.
Yeah.
But even that stuff, we're not really at a place yet, I think, where that's, quite has gotten there. So, what do you
Yeah.
any good
No.
things that you've been reading or watching? Anything that you can recommend?
Let's see. I just finished watching Shrinking on Apple and loved it. It was heartfelt and hilarious, and yeah, absolutely love that. And Apple's been really knocking it out of the park lately with some of their shows. I really enjoy some of the stuff they've been doing. So that's great. Yeah, I love Shrinking. I'm trying to think. I've read anything recently. Oh, I did kind of I'd never read it before. I've been working my way through a little of like Cormac McCarthy's stuff, and I read Suttree. I just finished that a few weeks ago, and that's quite a read. It's McCarthy. I mean, it's it's like it's almost like another language. Like he can write a paragraph where half the words in the paragraph I have to look up for their meanings. So I mean, it's definitely a journey when you go on any of his stuff and whatnot. But yeah, that was probably the last thing I read. That was really good. But yeah, the other one, speaking of AI, that was a little bit in there. Stephen Markley released a book. His first book was Ohio, and his new book is The Deluge. And I think that came out in January. And it's basically like about
It's like 900
the end of the
pages.
world for climate change. It's enormous. It's
Yeah.
absolutely just like do not drop it on your foot. It's huge. but he's yeah, I kind of discovered him last year. I'd kind of missed Ohio when it came out, and I read Ohio, and then as soon as the Deluge came out, I picked that up, and he's fantastic. So I finished that, and he's got quite a bit of AI stuff in the background of the Deluge, which was interesting. And there is a little writing commentary about that, about somebody using AI to kind of write their memoir and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that was a great book. I really enjoyed that. It's probably the best book I've read so far this year. So yeah,
That's interesting. I decided to get the Kindle edition when I realized that it was just going to be, again, like 900 pages. And I was like, I just can't. I
yeah,
didn't even look at the audiobook. The audiobook was like 30 hours or something or something. I mean, it is insanely long, but yeah,
yeah,
I hear nothing but good things about it. So that's great.
yeah.
Um, so anyway, well, Joe, congratulations again on the Edgar nomination for Or Else, which again is available on Amazon. Everybody can go check that out. Fingers crossed that you're up against like 4 or 5 other books right in that category.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah,
also congratulations again on the new release. I keep saying new release. I mean, technically it's not out yet. But again, if you're
it's tech.
if you're an Amazon
Yeah,
reader, you can get the first reads. You can download it for free, or I believe if you're not, you can download it for what, $1.99, the
yeah.
Kindle
You can get
edition.
Yeah, so you can get $1.99 right now for the digital version and stuff. So yeah, it's like a soft release or something. I don't know what they call it, but yeah. So yeah, full on, full release, all the formats and whatnot May 1st. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then if anybody wants to check you out online, where can they do so?
Probably my website is the best because that's kind of a good spot to kind of see and go outward for all the work and stuff. So joehartbooks.com is the best place to find me. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. joehartbooks.com. So, all right. Well, thank you again, Joe, for hanging out, and everybody
Yep.
go check out Joe's books, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.